Well, hello and welcome back to this episode of the Path Podcast. We're so glad you are joining with us. We are concluding our mini-series around fasting today. It's been such a fun one. I encourage you to go back and listen to the previous 3 episodes. We are doing this in the middle of a season of 21 days of prayer and fasting as a church. However, really this can be useful for any time of the year, whenever you choose to do a fast. And as we've talked about in previous episodes, really, there should be multiple times a year where maybe you're taking some time to intentionally fast. But this whole series has been about helping people understand on a deeper level what is fasting, what are some of the misconceptions, why you should fast, and then talking about why you should fast actually from a biblical standpoint, as well as talking about the benefits of fasting. This last episode 3, we talked about really the practicals of fasting. What are some ways to kind of pick the right one, to jump into the right one? What do you do if you mess up? All those types of things. And for our last episode today, you're going to get a chance to hear from someone who has gone through a season of fasting on her journey and really been changed by it, just as a testimony to what God can do through the power of a fast. But joining with me today, there's the wonderful Miss Addie Overla.
Hi, guys.
So good to have you back. And then there is the one and only, the legendary Cowboy Carter, or maybe wannabe Cowboy Carter, Hope Mitchell.
Wow, what an honor. Hi, I'm good. I'm happy to be here.
Good. I'm so glad you are joining with us today. Now listen, I'm going to put you on the spot. I'm going to ask you the question that I've asked everyone. Now, I mentioned that we are in the middle of a season of 21 days of prayer and fasting as a church. You might be listening to this afterwards again. That's okay. But as you've approached this time of prayer and fasting, and you don't have to share anything you don't want to, but maybe what's been different, what's been your mindset, what are you hoping for as you've kind of approached this time of prayer and fasting as a church?
Yeah, I feel like this time of prayer and fasting is a little different just because I'm in a different season of life than I've ever been in. I'm engaged and I know, thank you.
Yep.
And get married this year, and my family recently all moved away. So I'm just kind of in a weird transition of life, which I feel like is every year. But I feel like this year has been a little bit different approaching fasting and prayer. I haven't felt as prepared per se as I normally have. I was sick over the holidays, and I think that kind of threw me off. So if I'm being quite honest, I wasn't as prepared as what I usually am. But I do feel like I've kicked off the fast well the past few days, and I'm feeling better about it. Feeling better.
That's good. Sometimes the hardest part when it comes to fasting is just get started.
Yes.
And I feel like a lot of times that can even trip people up. And I just want to say, whether you're in the middle of our fast now or you are starting one at some other point, like just start. Like you don't need to have it all figured out, have all the answers done. Sometimes the best thing to do is to just start.
Exactly. And I feel like what you just shared is super real, because isn't that just like God, that all the time we get put into seasons and situations that we weren't prepared for? So
exactly.
That's what I love about the 21 days of fast that we do, is it's just an invitation that, hey, maybe you weren't ready for this at the beginning of the year, but we're going to do it. We're going to walk alongside you, and God's going to move. So
it's so cool to have people surrounding you as you're walking through it too. I love that.
So you had a journey through a prior 21 days of prayer and fasting that I think was really, really special. I want to talk about that. So I just want to start by asking this question. How did you see God move during a personal time of fasting in your story?
It's a loaded question. We could be here for 4 hours if I dug into every single detail. But I'll start just at the very top. My first time hearing about fasting was 10 years ago.
Okay.
I won't say that. First time hearing about it, it was my first time being serious about like, okay, I'm going to do this. I was in college, I was away, and I was like gung-ho. Like, I don't know what this means, but here I am. I'm going to say yes to it. And I didn't know now 10 years later what my yes could have done. But I will say I saw God move in my family so dramatically. And here's the spoiler alert. I started that year praying and believing for all of my family, my mom, my dad, and my brother, to know Jesus. And that felt like a huge stretch to me at that time. Like, there's no way that, God, you're going to reach and grab their hearts. But I am now 10 years out from that time, And I can confidently say that all of my family knows and walks with Jesus now.
That's awesome. Praise God.
Yeah, like seriously, a true miracle. And I fully believe that it's because of all of the years of allowing him to be a part of the story.
Yeah.
So I know that's like, bam, there it is. There's her story.
No, it's good.
But I think we could go for hours with the details. But just believing that that's what it was. Like the faith, the many, many years of crying and prayer and journaling and just hours of asking him to be in the story.
It's awesome. Yeah, no, I feel like that's an incredible story. Praise God, first of all. And then second of all, like I just think that's, again, a lot of people, I think, approach times like this where maybe they're praying for their children or they're praying for a broken relationship and they're asking God to move in that area. And so I just think that that's very, very relatable, and it's awesome to hear God working. So I'm curious, that first fast 10 years ago, do you remember like what kind of fast you did? Like what was your process going?
I was my mom, like I said, my mom just moved. So I went through all of my stuff at her house and all of my journals were actually at her house. So, when you see an old journal, you're like, let me flip through it. I fasted coffee and coffee only that very first year.
Okay. That's a big ask.
It is a big ask. But at the time I was like, okay, like what is it? And I was taught fast something that feels like a sacrifice. That's what I fully believe. We should be fasting something that feels like a sacrifice. At the time, I was in college. It felt like a huge sacrifice to fast coffee, like a huge sacrifice. So I was like, okay, this is my first year. I'll do it. I'm ready. And so I fasted coffee, and I will say, like, I was tired. I felt very tired. I had headaches for days.
Grumpy Hope.
No, I was grumpy. I don't know if I was grumpy because the church that I was at the time, we did 6 a.m. prayer every single day.
So you're tired.
So I got up.
No caffeine.
Yep. And it was in January. It was cold. But I fasted coffee, and I can remember like making the decision, like, this is what I'm going to do. And after the 21 days, I was like, wow, I am so grateful that that's what I fasted. Yeah. But over the course of the years, I mean, I feel like I've fasted of various different things. Last year, I did like a different fast every week of the fast. So like week 1, week 2, week 3. So, but yeah, that very first year was coffee and coffee only.
Dang.
Wow. I know.
So as you were going to that one, we were just talking about you feel like this one you weren't quite as prepared for.
Yeah.
Were you like more intentional that one as you were kind of deciding about it? Like how prepared do you feel like you were, or was it just a spur of the moment, last minute decision? This is what I'm going to do.
I feel like it was more spur of the moment, and that was only because I wasn't very familiar with fasting. So I had just like completely committed my life to Jesus in October of that year. So it was just a couple months after. And so I'm very fresh, very new, not sure what I'm doing. So I think it was more spur of the moment. I will say now that I'm years in, it feels a little easier to just be like, I don't know, we'll see. Yeah. Over the course of the years, I was very intentional. There were a few years that I would take a month to pray about what should I be fasting. So it has changed every year for me.
No, that makes sense. I do feel like sometimes spur of the moment, I want to say, we think it's maybe not the way you should do it, but sometimes it's just, again, it's obedience. There's an opportunity that's put in front of you, and you were obedient to it, and you went for it, and you didn't overthink it. And this one, now, was it hard to finish that time of fasting, being like your first time through it?
Yeah.
What'd you do to keep going?
That was challenging. I will say I had a roommate at the time who is my best friend now, and we kind of started our journey together. And so having her was really helpful, like very helpful. And, we say all the time, there's power in having people around you in community. Yeah. And so I fully believe that because I was going to prayer at 6 a.m. every morning and with people, and then had a best friend and a roommate at the time that was in it with me, it really helped. So I think that's kind of what pushed me. Yeah. I will say because I was new to it, I was like, okay, it's day 17 and nothing's happened. Like I had no idea what, and I think that's very real for people, especially if it's your first time. Yeah. It's like, okay, I said yes to doing this for you, God, and I haven't seen you do anything at all. And so I think that was probably the most challenging for me. It wasn't abstaining from coffee. It was more so like, okay, I'm doing this, but I'm not seeing any changes. Yeah. And I think even a huge part of my story is I didn't see changes in what I was praying and believing for.
Yeah, it's like
for 4 years.
It's not like your mom and dad and brother like immediately became Christ followers.
That was my question. Yeah. So like, I feel like there's probably people out there listening. I know someone who prayed and fasted for a child. This was their adult child who was addicted to drugs for 13 years before they were delivered from that. And so I feel like there's people out there listening who've been praying and fasting, you know, your story is a decade, maybe even longer, who haven't seen that move yet. So I'd love to hear like when within the 10 years, like each family member came to know Christ. But I guess also this kind of a two-part question, what encouragement you could give to the person who's like still seeking, still waiting, still like heart achingly just waiting for that answer.
Yeah. For me, and like you said, everyone's story is different. Yeah. And that's what I have to remember every single year. Everyone's story is different. But for me, it wasn't until year 4 that I saw a shift in my family. And it was actually my mom first. Wow. And she had been in and out of church. And, you know, this is my home church. This is where I grew up. And so she knew that, okay, this is the church that I'm going to be at too. I was away still, and I can remember her saying, hey, I'm going to go to church one Sunday. And I was like, oh, okay, great. I'm like, here it is. Yes. Yeah.
You're like, it's happening.
Yeah. And that wasn't even, you know, that was like a process too. Yeah. 1 week she'd come, 1 week she wouldn't. And it wasn't until I heard her say, hey, I think I want to start serving, that I was like, okay, this is real for her. Like she has made a decision, and this is like she's committing. And so that was for her. And actually it's really cool. I moved back to Columbus now almost 3 years ago, which is crazy. Yeah. But that first year that I was back, I actually got to baptize her in this church, which is just really cool. And just a fun little part of the story that I like to share. But, and then it wasn't until year 6 that I'm like, yes, mom has committed. Now I'm praying for my dad and my brother. And it was year 6 that I had a conversation with my dad that made me realize, okay, it's clicking for him. Like there is something shifting in him. Him and I had a rocky relationship up until that point. And so for me to hear him say, he says the big man upstairs, and I love him for that. It's like the old man way of acknowledging God. But there's been so many moments that I'm like, wow, it's real. He's actually walking with the Lord. And then actually it was the year that I moved back here that my brother, it was kind of crazy. My parents are divorced, but my mom was sitting in this auditorium that we're sitting in right now. My dad was sitting in this auditorium, and my little brother on Easter. And that was the moment that I was like, wow, everyone is walking with him now. And you know, I'll be honest, I think when we think about prayer and fasting and we write things down and we journal it, we're like, oh, yes, we're going to celebrate when we get to that point. But I'll be honest, I think I didn't necessarily do that. Yeah. Like I let it all kind of go. And I had to come to a point where I was then celebrating after all of it had happened. So that's my journey. It was throughout the last 10 years. It wasn't year 1, it wasn't year 2, it wasn't year 3 that it all came to pass. But I would say for the person that is hearing this and is like, man, I am still praying. I'm still praying. It's been 15 years. I'm still praying. I know it's not the answer you want to hear, but just keep praying. Yeah. I think we serve a God that is in every little detail. And you don't know maybe the little tiny seeds that you're planting in that person's life. I can remember conversation after conversation with my little brother, who is 8 years younger than me, that he probably was so annoyed that I was bringing things up or that I was making him go to church with me or whatever. But now he's 20, and I am so thankful. There are little things that I see that God put in me to plant in him. Yeah. And so the little things that you can do to plant seeds in that person's life, even alongside of praying and believing that God is going to do his part, is powerful. So just keep praying. I know that it's so hard to hear that when you're probably 20 years down, but I just fully believe that he is going to move.
That's really good. It makes me think of the verse in Ephesians that he can do immeasurably more than we ask, think, or imagine. And I even have to remind myself of that sometimes because I have family members who are far from God, and it's the cry of my heart that like one day Jesus will just like grab them by the heartstrings and be like, here I am, you know? Yeah. And I just have to remind myself that he can do literally anything. And your story is such a testament to that he is the God of the impossible. And that as long as, like you said in the beginning, he has our yes and we have that willing heart, he can use that if you just continue giving him your yes.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, we've had little windows into your journey, and I know that they're just windows.
Yeah.
There's probably so many twists and turns in that time period that we could go through. But just give us some insight into whatever, again, you feel comfortable sharing. Like, what's the biggest thing you felt like you've learned? Like, what has God spoken to you? Like, what's your big, as you're sitting here maybe 10 years after the fact, and, you know, hope 10 years ago, maybe full of naivete or faith, is just expecting God to do something big. Yeah. And now you've gone on this journey. Like, what has God spoken to you? How has he changed your heart? What have you learned through that journey?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing for me is all about my hand posture. I think he's taught me a lot about how to posture my hands. I think even in that year one, my hands were maybe a little clenched with Mom, Dad, Jake. I want these people to really know you, God. But over the course of 10 years, I think he's allowed me to stretch open my hands and really be open-handed with what I'm coming to him with, what I'm asking him for, and how I'm approaching him. There have been, like you said, so many twists and turns that I would not have expected in my story. But because I said yes to being open-handed, and I would say through prayer and fasting, but also just in life, that's why he's moving. I think I have a natural tendency to clench my hands and kind of control what I want to happen. But even moving back to Columbus, I felt him say, have open hands about it. I did not want to move back to my hometown at all. I've shared this story a million times, but I didn't want to. But I felt like he said, have an open hand, have an open heart. And I'm so thankful that I did, because my life is forever changed. Yeah. Like, seriously, forever changed in a number of ways. So I think over the years, I've just learned that when approaching him, whether it's through prayer and fasting or just in general, my hands have to be open to what he wants. Yes, there are things that I can list out and journal out and ask him for, but my hands also have to be open to what it is that he is going to do. Because like you said, he can, and like the word says, he can do more than what we can even think or imagine. But what more can he do if we're holding so tight to it that we can't see a change?
Yeah, no, it's so good, because I feel like in today's world, it's just so easy to think you can, I don't want to say trick God, but you can manipulate God. You have control, and I think all of us like to think we're kings of our own little empires, and we can move the pawn pieces and around, and it's like we are the ones in charge. And it's like no, like God is the author and perfecter of our faith. He is a sovereign God. He is Lord over all, and he has a plan for us in our lives. And not that we don't have free will, because we do, but I just think surrendering our will to God and saying, God, I want your will for my life. And I think that's what you're speaking to.
I also think it in one hand, it's scary to think that, right? To think like, oh my gosh, I'm letting go of control and allowing God to take control of my life. But on the other hand, just from experience, it's freeing.
It is, It
is extremely freeing to know the weight of my life, the weight of the world does not rest on my shoulders. It does not at all. And so I think there's this balance, right, that we all probably struggle with wherever you're at in your journey, whether you're just your year 1 or your year 10 or your year 30, we all struggle with that. But I think if we can rest in knowing we can come to him and we can talk to him and ask him for things, but also rely on us. He's the one with the power.
That's good. I once heard a lack of peace defined as the inability to give up control to God.
Yeah.
And that when we experience that lack of peace, it's because we're trying to control everything.
Yeah.
And I know that's absolutely been true in my life, but the truth is I cannot and do not want to try to control things over God. Like I can't fill those shoes. If I was in charge of my own life, I would not be here right now at this table talking about God, you know? So I just want to say thanks, Hope, for being so vulnerable, for sharing your encouraging story. And to all those listening out there, I hope that whether you're like wrestling in your fast right now, if you feel in a low place where you're doubting, where you're just tired of being hungry or of praying the same prayers over and over again, I hope Hope's story has encouraged you today and reminded you that if he can do it for someone else, like he absolutely can do it for you. He wants to give his children good things. He seeks for all of his people to know him. And so whatever you're praying and fasting for this season, we're with you in it, not just as a church, but as brothers and sisters in Christ. And so if you loved this episode, be sure to check out the other 3 that we have. We covered, as Pastor Zach said, why fast. We covered the benefits of fasting and the practicals of fasting. And really, this podcast is here for you to listen to in every season of fasting. So if it brought you encouragement in this season, listen to it again in the next fast season that you do, because it's here for the long haul, just like us, and we're here as a church to support anybody who's listening in any way. So be sure to check us out at the X Church on Instagram or our website. And we just want to say thanks for being a part of the ride.
Thank you so much. We'll see you next time.